All right, hello everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Amanda. My Zoom name right now is a little bit of a lie, but Sam is going to be taking over in a second. I work in the alumni office here at Marist. Not entirely sure where to look because there's people here in front of me and people on the computer screen. So I'm going to try and have my first actual hybrid event, which is kind of interesting. So thank you all so much for coming. Both as panelists and as guests for this event. It's a really nice opportunity to get everyone together and just kind of talk and celebrate and get to know each other a little bit better. I'm going to introduce today's moderator for the event. Their name is Sam. They use they, them pronouns. They're a junior fashion design major at Marist, and they are also the current Fox Pride president. So I'm going to turn it over and let them introduce the rest of the panel. If you have questions that you want to ask, if you're in person, just raise your hand and we'll bring you a microphone. If you are on the computer, you can either type it directly into the Q&A or chat, and Sam or I will grab it for you, or you can raise your hand, and again, we'll let you unmute yourself and join the actual video part of the panel, okay? I'll kind of monitor the chat from an external computer so we can keep control of that, and I'm going to turn it over to Sam. Thanks, Sam.
Hello. So yeah, I'm going to be moderating. So first off, I just want to introduce our panelists. The first one that I have on my list is Rosemary DaCruz, who uses they, them pronouns. Rosemary is a lesbian, non-binary political organizer from Poughkeepsie. During their 4 years at Marist, they found a loving group of friends who encouraged them to explore their gender and sexuality before formally coming out their senior year. After graduating in 2021, they realized they couldn't bear to leave the community they'd grown to love, so they didn't. Currently, Rosemary works as the distributed organizer at For the Many, a progressive grassroots organization in the Hudson Valley. They're fortunate that their identity has been accepted and embraced by their supportive coworkers, and are thankful that they can be out as themselves every single day. When Rosemary isn't fighting for a better world, they can be found exploring New York with their fiance, Liliana, or petting stray cats. You want to say hey real quick?
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. Hope you can see and hear me okay. I'm in my very empty apartment, just moved in. But thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here.
Awesome. Our next panelist is Douglas Philip Cyr. Apologize if I butchered your last name. Who uses he, him pronouns. Douglas is a 2017 Phi Alpha Alpha graduate of Marist College School of Management, where he obtained his MPA in Healthcare Administration and was subsequently invited to serve as adjunct faculty. Since 2009, he has maintained a private practice, offers counseling, training, and crisis response services to local first responder agencies. And in 2019, he became the manager of behavioral health services for the Employee Assistance Program at Pacific Gas and Electric, the nation's largest utility. His greatest pride, however, was purchasing his first home with his husband this year, where they live with their 10-year-old Tibetan Terrier, Charlie. If you want to say hey.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I really appreciate the invitation, Amanda, and I'm looking forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
So our next panelist is Brad Whitmore, who uses he, him pronouns. Brad is a senior advancement officer at the CIA Culinary Institute. His responsibilities include oversight and management of the college's advancement and business development operations, specifically alumni relations, the college's scholarship program, and overseeing the Society of Fellows. Brad hails from Kingston, New York, and he graduated from SUNY Delhi with a degree in architecture, followed by a degree in graphic arts from SUNY Oneida, and finally Marist College in 2006 with a Master of Public Administration. Since graduating, he has lived in San Francisco, but currently resides in Poughkeepsie with his husband, Gary Holbert, Marist alum 2015. They've been together for 17 years, married for 9, and have a teacup Yorkie named Mia. Currently, their time is spent renovating their 1920 English Tudor, traveling the globe, and exploring new restaurants, breweries, and wineries. Brad is an active board member of the Hudson Valley LGBTQ+ Center in Kingston and was a past board member of the City of Poughkeepsie. City of Poughkeepsie Zoning Board of Appeals. If you want to say hey real quick.
What's up, everybody? I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Marist, for hosting this, and I'm excited to chat with the other panelists, including my husband, Gary.
And our final panelist is Gary Halbert. So Gary uses he, him pronouns and is an emergency management administrator at Vassar, where he has been for nearly 2 years. Before that, he had a successful and rewarding 23 career in law enforcement, retiring as a patrol lieutenant from the town of Poughkeepsie Police Department in the beginning of 2020. When he was with the town, Gary was a liaison between the police department and Marist, working closely for many years with stakeholders at the college, including student conduct, bringing awareness to domestic violence, guest lecturing for classes and student programs, building relationships with students in off-campus housing, and coordinating security details on campus. Prior to working at the town, Gary spent 4 years with the city of Gloversville Police Department and 2 years at the Montgomery County Sheriff Department, both in New York. Gary grew up in Johnstown, New York, and moved to Poughkeepsie in 2003. Graduated from Marist in 2015 with a Bachelor in Criminal Justice and received his master's degree in Justice Studies from Southern New Hampshire University in 2018. Want to say hello?
Hi, everybody. Happy to be here. It's my second time actually doing this with Marist, and just want to say thank you for hosting again.
Awesome. Well, now that you have met our panelists, I suppose it's time we jump right into the questions. So the first question that we have here is discuss your workplace coming out experience. Were you already out? Did you have to come out strategically to certain people, or did you keep your identity hidden?
Who goes first?
You can start with Brad.
Yeah, for me, I came out when I was 21. I was a senior in college. I've always been out and proud. However, being gay is just a part of me. So I like, it's not my whole being, but it's an important part of me. So I like people to get to know me first. And then if they find out I'm gay, great. It adds to a more lively conversation, but yeah.
Then you can popcorn it over to someone else.
Rosemary, since you're a recent grad.
Yeah, I'm very, very lucky in that I never really had to come out at my job. I started as an intern, and one of the first things that made me excited to apply there was the questions that they ask about diversity. They include optional questions where you can specify your gender identity, race, ethnicity, or any other info that they should know about you. And they asked for my pronouns and included they, them as an option. And that's when I was like, wow, these people are like the real deal. I applied for a full-time position and they knew I was queer. And in my interview, I talked about how my experiences as a queer person intersected with my political work, and they understood it and cared about it. And it was really easy. And I know I'm really, really lucky to be in a workplace like this, and not everyone's experiences will be like that. However, I will say that like most people in the LGBTQ plus community, we all have to keep coming out over and over, and not everyone is always safe to come out to, even if your workplace is accepting. There will always be someone who doesn't know I'm not straight, or someone who I need to casually come out to in conversation when we share our pronouns or whatever, when it might come up. And in my line of work, political organizing, we're not always talking to people we agree with or people that have the same views on acceptance as us, and that's where I kind of have to hide more of who I am. But yeah, I can popcorn it over to you, Gary.
So I was 26 when I came to Poughkeepsie, and I was not out when I came to Poughkeepsie. I wanted to prove myself professionally before that came out, and I was a little apprehensive because of working in law enforcement. But about a year and a half, maybe after, not even that, about a year of being there, I was anonymously outed by an email to my administration, and I was called in and was told that they were received this information that I was gay and dating another man. So awkward conversation to have, but it was probably the best thing that happened to me. I was fortunate to work for an amazing police department, the town of Poughkeepsie, that services Marist College, actually. Amazing support, and it didn't change any relationships that I had or new relationships with people there. So I can say that I was very fortunate. And Doug.
Thanks, Gary. So I grew up, I was telling Brad earlier, I live in California, but I grew up on a very small Canadian border town called Fort Kent, Maine. Some of you might know it, and if you think it's near Bangor, you're wrong. It's 3 hours north. It was very, very not an okay place to be gay growing up as a kid. When I was 21, I ended up moving across the country to Miami to go to music school. And that was where I came out. I actually took a workshop with Rob Eichberg, who was the founder of National Coming Out Day. And if you haven't read his book, it's called Coming Out, An Act of Love. It is a great, great book, and it's a great primer on the whole topic of being out. So shortly after that, I think I came out to a couple of people at that time, but I was coming out right as I was getting ready to move out to California for graduate school. And so I ended up coming out, at my graduate school where I was studying psychology. So easily connected with other LGBT folks in the community, although in the early 90s, there was just so much of the national dialogue that just wasn't happening. And so it kind of felt like a struggle. Maybe I'll share more about my current workplace coming out experience, which was really fun. But that's kind of it. I can relate to things that have been said on the panel already in terms of you have to keep coming out to certain people. I just got a new supervisor recently, and so there was a whole process, and she was a former cop, and she's now a psychologist, and it was just so easy to come out to her. And it really just kind of depends on the organization and where you're with and what the dynamics are at the time. Got to figure that one out. Yeah. So that's all for now.
Well, thank you guys for answering that question. The next one that we have is, when you were looking for your first job, what was your search like? Were you able to tell from a website or a web page how open or accepting a company would be? And this time I think we'll start with Rosemary.
Yeah, I would say a huge part of this is just looking at what's available and how a workplace presents themselves. For example, at my job, at my organization, if you go on our website, you can see the diversity just from the staff who are open about who they are. Everyone's pronouns are listed there. Queer members of staff talk about their partners and their staff bios. And it's clear that while it's not a major focus of the organization and the work we do, people feel safe being themselves and being open about it. Another big thing I think is maybe just looking at what available like HR resource, like human resources there might be. For my org, there's an entire portion of like our public facing HR that is dedicated to teaching people about things like microaggressions and respecting people's identities when they come out. And that's huge to just be able to see that like open and publicly. So it takes a little bit of like research and looking around, but I think that at least in my experience, you can find some type of info. But full disclosure, this is my first job straight out of college, so I'm sure the other panelists might have more to offer in this than me. And whoever would like to go next, feel free.
I
Gary,
I'm
go
just
ahead.
going to say, being at Vassar, Vassar is probably one of the most diverse campuses in the country. So I didn't have to really look, but you do feel at home there. And then my previous employment, the police department, it's not something really that's promoted. And it's just a different culture. But again, and I think bigger departments, it's easier and more comfortable than smaller departments, and geography also plays a part in that as well. I think we all know that. So, but yeah, Vassar, you didn't have to look, just a very diverse campus.
I go. Honestly, when I was first graduating college looking for a job, I was looking for a paycheck. And whoever basically hired me, I took it. But I moved to California. I lived in San Francisco. I was telling Doug right after I graduated college, and I started working at a gay bar as a bartender. So they were pretty open. I didn't have to do much research about it. And it paid the bills, paid the bills pretty well. So, I mean, now when I look for new jobs, but I've worked at, Marist, I worked at Bar, I worked at, CIA here, they're all pretty open and progressive, which is good. But now I'm a little more conscious if I'm looking for my next move. Of course, I look at, am I going to be successful there? Am I going to, is the salary going to be, right? But also, are they going to be open? What's the culture like? What's the work environment? So it's much more important to me now. But when I was first graduating, I was like looking for a paycheck. So, over, Doug.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's only probably in the last decade that I've been seeing organizations putting anything related to diversity inclusion on their websites. I think in general, the workforce has been really slow, slower than I would have liked to have seen. Let's put it that way, because it certainly wasn't that way when I started in my first job. And like Brad, I mean, I was just looking for a paycheck when I first got started too, but it's definitely more probably the last decade where I just started looking and making sure that these companies had what it took to support a diverse workforce and to support someone who was going to be out, because I wasn't going to go back in the closet for a paycheck at that point. That was really important to me. At one point, I do remember looking, so folks don't know about the Human Rights Campaign Fund. It's kind of the legal arm of LGBTQ advocacy in the United States. They have something called a Corporate Equality Index. And every year they evaluate corporations across the country and evaluate them on their diversity inclusion practices. And so I remember at one point looking at that and look at the agencies. I don't think I'm currently working for one of the agencies that's on them, but our agency is very, very progressive and diverse and supportive, and I love it. But if people are interested, it's kind of an interesting thing to look at, which corporations do openly publish some of those policies.
Thank you. So to kind of piggyback off the last question about interviewing and looking for jobs, without explicitly saying like, this is what I said, what would you think are good questions to ask during interviews to try and get a sense of a company's acceptance or openness if you can't really find that information elsewhere? And let's start this one with Gary.
I guess maybe, does your company participate in any diversity related events? Brad and I actually marched for the first time Marist was in the Pride Parade. So yeah, that was a lot of work and a long day. So I would say, yeah, does your company participate in any diversity related events?
Yeah, and I would say similarly, how does your company view and support a diverse work organization, and just hear how they talk about it? Because it's not, diversity covers a lot of ground, and it's really important to kind of hear how they break that one down. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I basically echo what everybody has said. I would actually ask the question, like, what's the culture like? What is the work environment like? I mean, not only is being able to do the job and being successful, but also being able to be comfortable and feeling included. And so ask the question, like, what's the culture like here? Is it progressive? Is it, and also, like, I always try to find somebody that I might know that works on LinkedIn. You could see connections, like who's connected to what company, and see who's connected to who, and just ask that person too, and find out, like, hey, is it inclusive? Is it a good culture? Is it like progressive? Or is it somewhere that, like, I can't feel like I can be myself? Because if that's the case, run for the hills. There's plenty of jobs out there.
Thank you. So for those of you who might be either in a managerial position or have the ability to oversee hiring, either present or past have done that, how do you personally ensure that you're creating a workplace which fosters and encourages diversity and acceptance? You can start with Doug.
Alrighty. Yeah, so I am a manager. I've been a manager for 15 years. It's a very unique job. I hire and supervise therapists. So the field of therapy is a very interesting field. The American Psychological Association just came out and acknowledged, I don't know if folks, you can probably find it on the American Psychological Association website, where they talked about how the field of psychology has contributed to racism over the last 100 years. And it's fascinating. It's just fascinating. And it's slow, so slow to show up for my field changing. So recently we've been working with my company, but also our contract company to look at diversity hiring practices. We actually can I say that? Yeah, we can. So I just want to be careful here. With PG&E, the company I contract with, we actually talked to their hiring department, their recruiting department, to talk about initiatives they're doing because they're extremely progressive when it comes to how they hire for diversity. And so we've been doing some benchmarking with them. And I actually just recently hired a couple of folks, and we were really wanting to bring on more therapists of color on our team. And so we recently found a website called Therapists of Color, and I think it's just for California, but they've got different cities where therapists can go in and put their information on so that people can find therapists of color, but also I put it out there to see who we could bring on board on our team. So we recently hired a lovely woman from that team, from that group. And so it's an active conversation. It's an active conversation in my field, in my profession, which is it's a little niche. So.
I'll go. Yeah, I mean, I'm a hiring manager. I have a team of 5. I have a small but mighty little pride flag that hangs up behind me, and a picture of Gary and I. So it's subtle, but it's there, so everybody knows that. I have a pretty inclusive, and I'm open about my relationships and who I am, but subtly. Yeah, I mean, when I'm in interviews, I always talk about like going back to the culture, right? And I'm having an interview process. I talk about the culture here at CA. I talk about the culture of specifically of our office and how open we are and how inclusive we are, and we have a work-life balance, and not just even being openly gay, but also like being able to spend time with your partner or your wife, your spouse, or your kids, and you don't have to work till 9 o'clock every night, even though some nights I pretty much do. And I share all that information, and you should feel, if you're interviewing, to ask those questions. What is that work-life balance, and how can I disconnect from work, right? So we're all accessible now, especially with Microsoft Teams and everything else we have going on. We're on 24/7. So just understanding what's the expectation, what's the balance there, because we all need balance in our lives.
I think I just want to echo what Brad said. I always reference, when I can, my relationship with my husband in interviews, but I will say in law enforcement, it was challenging. I actually did my master's project on racial disparity in law enforcement. And because of New York State has competitive testing, so basically you're just given a pool of candidates to interview. It's not people just coming in with a resume. So this is what you have, and this is what you have to pick from. So unfortunately, it's a little outdated process, I think, and New York really needs to be more progressive with their recruitment and hiring.
So along with continuing talking about jobs, what have your experiences been with allies, and how have they really impacted your career path?
Yeah, I can start. I'm going to say that allies are genuinely like a godsend sometimes. Of course, I really rely on my, fellow LGBTQ plus community members, and I appreciate their solidarity in the workplace. But allies have, the privilege and power to assert that acceptance is the norm and craft the space around you to be accepting. They can do this in small, simple ways by doing something like introducing themselves with their pronouns or using using gender neutral language for people we don't know, and small things like that just make a world of difference. But they also can do this in bigger ways. You know, in my experience, just like asserting my correct name when others can't respect it, or making sure we're in spaces where my coworkers and I can feel safe to bring our partners out to public events. The biggest thing I think I would say is that the support of my allies has encouraged me to continue to advocate for myself and my own identity, and know that I can be in a workplace where that identity is fully respected. And that's really, really important to me.
I can jump in. Yeah, I think allies are critical to your success, our success. Not only do they support, offer mentorship and friendship, and it would have been difficult to achieve my success without having allies. Allies too, and it's a broad sense of like allies. They support my, being gay and out in the workforce, but also like help me make decisions in life with my career. I actually had two amazing mentors at Marist, Tim Massey, who's the director of communication, and Robin Torres. If you don't know her, like go chat with Robin Torres. She's like in the first year program. She's the reason why I actually I went on this weird path. I was an architect and graphic designer, and then I went off into development, worked at Bard College, and I was like, I don't even know what development is. And she was like, you'll be great at it. You can talk to anybody. And so I took this job because Robin Torres told me to take it. And it's been the best decision in career. So have those allies, listen to them, use them for support, for guidance, in all aspects of life and job, and they're a great asset.
So speaking of allies, I feel like I'm making allies with some of the panel members here. Brad, my husband works in development for the San Francisco Opera. So we have to talk.
Absolutely.
We'll have to talk. Yeah, allies are crucial. I think, when I first came out and was making connections with people in the workplace, this was in the early 90s, yeah. Late 80s, early 90s. I think when I was that young, I think the whole workplace world felt so big, and the issue felt so big. It wasn't until 20, 30 years later, I'm sure Brad and Gary would agree. We're kind of like, whatever. People like you, they don't. I don't care. It just doesn't even matter anymore. But that doesn't feel that way when you're 19. It feels like, it's that whole teenage angst stuff. So, for me, I think learning how to just not even pay attention to the naysayers and the haters, and just keep my mind on my job and my life and everything that's good in life, and focus on that and let the rest just kind of go, because at the end of the day, that's all we have. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that one.
Okay. So to kind of do like a complete 180 from the topic of allies, if you have dealt with either discrimination or harassment, how have you handled it as like a professional adult in the workforce?
Well, I got to tell you, working in law enforcement, you're going to get, there's a lot of humor in law enforcement agency. But what one believes is harassment and what one, believes otherwise, it was, my colleagues knew that they could joke with me, but that could be harassment to somebody else. So, so you really need to know your audience or know your colleagues to know the boundaries.
Mine was I had an experience where I was working at an organization, and they had these domestic partnership benefits that if you live together, you could share benefits, and you could have your partner on your benefits. And I actually was living on the campus, and it was like in a college on the college campus, and I wanted to participate in that benefit, but because the college didn't allow same-sex to live together, they were offering a benefit, but then saying I couldn't participate in it because I can't have a same-sex couple living on campus. So that has since obviously changed, and I challenged it a little bit, and I didn't win. Thankfully, we passed marriage equality, so that's a non-issue now. But back then, it was a big issue to me. It was the first time I actually felt discriminated against, where I'm like, there's all this benefit is being offered, and straight couples could take advantage of it too, but straight couples could live together on campus. So I was like, it's like this double standard that I'm like living in. And it's like right in front of my eyes, and it was the organization where I was working at, and I just, it just baffled me. But thankfully, we've moved past that, and there's marriage equality for all. But yeah, it was tough, especially for I was young. It was actually Gary. Well, it was like 17 years ago when Gary and I first got together. We wanted to live together, and we couldn't. But that's fine.
I'll follow on that thread. I would agree, Brad. I think things have really, really changed over time. So I want to put what I'm about to say in that context, that things have really changed over time. And I remember when I first came out, I'd hear stories about what happened in the 60s and 50s, 60s, and 70s. I'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe, blah, blah, blah. And then now I'm looking back in the 90s going, oh my God, I can't believe. So it's like, I guess every generation has that. And I'm just really thrilled that we're on this side of that. So I did have a job where I guess having a strong, professional, openly gay man in their workplace was not okay for them. There was, and this points to what Gary was saying about just knowing your audience and knowing where you're working. And if you know that there's certain places you just can't go, then you just don't go there, and you stay as long as you can, and you move on and don't even give it a second thought. So I was actually pushed out of a position, and it was directly following one particular interaction I had with a woman who I didn't know, but I found out later she was an extremely religious, conservative religious person. And I don't mind saying it, it was Kaiser. It was Kaiser Permanente. And it was a very difficult experience. It was hard to go through that and to recognize I was being terminated without cause. And I knew exactly why. And I had to really work at not caring. But the flip side of that, how much things have changed. I was in a position not that long ago when a woman came into my office and we worked together and we're chatting, and she made a comment about, well, men just have no empathy. Now, listen, I'm a psychotherapist, right? I've had therapists tell me, Doug, of all the sensitive therapists on the planet, you're on the far end of sensitivity, right? So, like, to have someone say that to me, anybody who knows me knows you're out of your freaking mind. And B, that anybody would say that in the workplace. Holy jeez. And I immediately reported it to my supervisor. I said, you need to know what this person just said to me. And when I told her, she said, are you kidding me? And I said, no. And I was not okay with it. And she knew I wasn't okay with it. And I know that they were spoken to. That's all I know. You never can find out how those things go. But I felt really glad that I had hit the point inside myself where I'm absolute zero tolerance for discrimination in a hostile work environment. That's what it fell under. And I was not tolerating it. And B, I was working for a corporation that I knew had my back. And and so I don't mind telling you, that was 2019. So you can really, really see how the trajectory the needle has just really moved over time. But then again, let's be real. This panel today, we're representing California and New York. And so you think about some of the states who may not have, because what we're talking about here is state protections in general, because I could be wrong, please forgive me if I'm misspeaking, but I still don't believe we have federal workplace protections, right? That they have not passed that yet. And so we're looking at a state-by-state law when it comes to workplace protections. There are still, the last time I checked about a year ago, there were still 23 states in the country where you can be fired for being gay and no recourse whatsoever. So we've come a very long way, and there is still so much further to go and a lot of work. And I think it takes people like us showing up, to make the difference. So.
So the next question that we have is, how were you able to come out in the workplace without kind of letting it define you professionally, of it being like, oh yes, this is this person, they are our gay employee, like that kind of idea?
I think that's impossible. Once you're out, you're like target, it's what it is.
There is a label for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry. I think the main point that I think the rest of the panelists would agree with is that you can't control how other people will see you or define you in the workplace. If someone only wants to see you as gay or trans or whatever your identity might be, then they will. But if you do good work and you have valuable skills and you're an important part of the team because of what you bring to the table, then your gender and sexuality won't define you. They're part of who you are. Sure, they're super important to me. But if anyone can't accept that, then there's nothing you can do, and you shouldn't hide who you are just because of how others choose to perceive you.
Yeah, and I don't think you have to come out. I mean, and you can let it happen organically, right? I always let people want to get to know me first before they're like, oh, that's the new gay guy. I want them to know me a little bit better, and then it sort of happens like office chit chat, right? They're like, oh, you're new to the area, or where do you live, or what's your wife's name? And I'm like, Gary. And so that always used to sort of has a fun little response. It's usually like quiet for a while, and I'll let it sit there for a little bit. And it's like I always tell a story when Gary was a police lieutenant, I got a badge that said officer's husband, and then I would get pulled over once in a while for speeding because I was always late. And the cop would always say, "Oh, well, what's your wife's name?" I was like, Gary. And 99.9% of the time I always got out of it because they didn't know what to say after that. So I mean, just let it happen organically. You don't have to force it on anybody. You don't have to, you can come out when you want to come out, but be out and proud. I mean, it's I don't mind being the token gay. However, I'm not the token gay in my office because there's three of us in this office who are male. They're all gay, and so it's a challenge because I have all these snazzy dressers that keep up with, but so
That's great. Yeah, I agree with Brad. Not all the conversations I have to be about being gay or being married to a man, but I made an agreement when I was 21 that I wouldn't hide it. And the only exception I've put to that is in my professional work as a therapist, because my personal life is not about why the client's coming to see me, but I always promised myself if anybody asked me 3 times. Twice I would try and circumvent, but the third time I would be honest. And I actually had a cop in my office who I was talking to, and he asked me that third time, he was talking about, yeah, you've seen those yoga posters with those girls in their yoga pants, and he was just like being the most sexist, obnoxious human being on the planet. And I said, dude, stop already. And I told him, and within 3 sessions he was gone. And I'm like, fine, I got a lot of people that want to see me, make room for others. But I don't worry about it anymore. That's the thing now. It's just, don't worry about it. It's nice to not have that adolescent self-consciousness anymore.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So does it help to be out in the workforce? Like, in other words, like, what are positive things about being out in the workplace?
Yeah, I could start. Yes, of course. I think that it is a positive generally if you're in an accepting workplace. If you're somewhere that you feel safe coming out, it will largely be a positive experience. I mean, it's just genuinely better when you get to be yourself, and when people are talking about their partners and their kids, you can talk about your spouse too. You don't have to, beat around the bush. And it also feels good to know that you're supported and cared for and accepted from like a work angle. It makes your experience in doing your work and doing your job so much better.
Yeah, I just think just being yourself, and you're adding to the diversity of your organization that you work for, and it also impacts your colleagues. And opens their eyes, if they want to be opened, opens their eyes, to a different lifestyle, and just being yourself. And you know, we have families. We have a family next to us, kind of, and her son is 6 years old, and he comes to our house frequently and asks questions. And it's usually, you know, it started out was, oh, where do you sleep, and where does Brad sleep, and how can you be married? Boys don't get married. But you know, and his mom is she has her PhD in education. She's fabulous, and she says, oh no, just tell him. You know, she goes, I do not hide it. She's like, you need to tell him. So, you know, and that is just powerful, and it warms my heart that there's people out there that think that way.
Yeah, I mean, does it help me to be out? It helps me, and then that's what counts, right? If it helps you to be out and proud. I love being gay. It's the best thing ever happened to me. You know, I don't mind if people ask questions. I actually appreciate if people ask questions. So I tell them how happy and how proud I am to be gay. So I thank my mom too for making me gay. Thanks, Mom. So. I mean, she birthed me, so she had a partner.
Yeah, I definitely think it helps to be out. I think not living my truth and not being who I was causing more difficulties. So yeah, from a personal, just mental health perspective, it just really helps to be out. But I also agree with what's been said in terms of why it's important for the workplace. From a visibility perspective, you know, I don't think things will change on a large scale until people people see, you know, that we're just normal like everybody else, that we just love a different gender, and that's what it is. And it's just a conversation I think that needs to keep happening. But I also agree. I also think that it's not that it just helps to be out. I think it's actually important to be out. And I have always thought about it from a perspective of fairness and equity. To be at work and to have everybody else talking about their spouses, their children, their vacations, and for me to like not be able to say anything because of the gender of the person I love just always seemed ridiculous to me. So once I there was just no going back. So.
Yeah, I just want to like throw one more thing in here. You know what Gary and Doug were saying about how important it is to be out for the way that other people see you, and that's definitely really a big thing that I think it's important that we have that representation in these fields of work. I know that I work with a lot of interns, students, and if you're ever looking for an internship, my job would love to give you one. But just talking about like my life and my fiance and my experience as a non-binary person makes them feel better about being there and being themselves if they are also queer. And it's a really good feeling to be able to give that to someone else.
Awesome. Before we continue with the other few questions I have, does anyone in the room have a question they want to ask our panelists? Yes.
I've been waiting patiently. Hi, everyone. My question is, y'all talked about the label piece, but I'm curious about tokenizing. As marginalized folks tend to be expected to speak for or get on the committees for, and be able to speak for all the LGBTQ community and so on and so forth. So do you have advice for folks on how to not get tokenized?
It was hard to hear the question, but
Echoing, if you just repeat.
about not being tokenized.
Yeah, how do you do you have advice for people who would want to avoid being tokenized, and so they're not expected to speak out and speak for other groups or to join the committees for it?
I'll jump on that one if I may. I think that one's a hard one because let's face it, our world, I'm thinking about corporate America because I work in corporate healthcare. That's just kind of the sector I'm in, right? So the corporation is constantly looking for ways to support and promote their work so that they can make better money and that kind of thing. So there's a whole machine in place. And if you are Asian American, somebody's going to want you in their group, in their employee group. If you're gay, somebody's going to want, it's because, but I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. So I don't know if there is a way to avoid it in the workplace because we are a minority, right? 10%
I
of the
agree
population or
1,000%
so.
with
I mean,
you.
anyway, go ahead, Brad. Sorry.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. I agree with you 100%. I actually don't mind being the token gay, even though I'm not, because there's two other gays that are here that I have to compete with to be the token. But I don't mind if people want to come to me and ask me questions about either being gay, or they want to learn, or they want to be educated, or they want my perspective, right? Because they learn from what I have to share, and some of the challenges that being an openly gay queer person have. So if we can actually be that bridge, and make it a better workplace, I don't mind being tokenized. But like, maybe that's not for everybody. And if you are being tokenized, it's okay to say something too. If every gay question just comes to you and you're like, oh my God, I'm like tired of all these gay questions, like, just say something. It's okay. You don't have to answer. You don't have to be tokenized if you don't want to be.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree that it's important for us to be a part of these conversations as queer folks. But the way that I typically approach conversations, I'm in very progressive spheres, and intersectionality is really, really important. So if people see like, oh, you're non-binary, okay, now I can rely on you for discussions about non-binary issues, and I have to be open and be like, this isn't the same for every non-binary person. This isn't the same for every other queer person. And especially trying to contrast that with you can't use me as the gay trans experience when there are Black gay trans people who have different experiences, or people who are assigned a different gender at birth. So it's about being very candid if you recognize that you are being like tokenized in that way, and that like, hey, I don't have all the answers, I'm just one person and my experiences are different than others.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, awesome. Does anyone else have any questions that they wanted to ask for the panel? Great, awesome. So going back to my little list that I've got here, what are some resources that could help students that are trying to find a job at specifically like a very inclusive company? If you have any specific tips for finding them, or like just going through that process.
It's pretty simple. I would just do your research. There's so much information on companies now online, or LinkedIn. Look to see where their policies are. There's always a about company. Like, click that button and read about them. And like I said before, if you can try to find somebody that actually works there and get the inside scoop on it, like, that's always super helpful.
That's what I was going to say. Anytime, I was looking for work, you can always call somebody and ask, the program director or something, and ask for an informational interview. 15 minutes, 10 minutes on the telephone, have your list of questions all ready. Most people are going to spend that. I mean, I would. If somebody's looking for a job at our company, in a heartbeat, I'd say, sure, I'll be happy to talk to you. And most people, that's been my experience, is most people are pretty open to informational interviews.
Yeah.
And I think this will be probably our final question just because of the time. So what kinds of advice would you give to current students who are just entering the workforce? Any advice whatsoever about jobs?
I'll go first. Just be yourself. Be your authentic self. Work hard. Be kind. Stay driven. And if you add a little flair to the office, so be it. Own it. It only can help you climb the corporate ladder. Just be careful if you do it in heels, guys or girls. Just be careful.
Yeah, that was almost word for word what I wrote down ahead of time that I was gonna say. The only thing I was gonna add is just to not try and change the way people think, because it's just be yourself. It speaks from example. People read. I mean, you can look down the street with someone walking down, and you can read kind of what that person's like, because human beings are really intuitive that way. So just be yourself. People will get it, and if they don't, they don't. But when I was younger, I used to really want to try and change how people thought about me, and it's like, oh, just don't even have time for that anymore. So.
That's so true.
I was gonna say fake it till you make it, but no, actually, I'm gonna join them with be yourself, because otherwise you get into that whole showing your true colors thing. You know, if you're not who you are right from the beginning, so be yourself.
Rosemary, do you have any final comments? Because I know you're brand new to the workforce. So
yeah. If this is
what was your method for going out there?
yeah, if this is the final, I mean, I can't echo enough of what everyone else is saying. Just like be yourself. I would say that at this point, you know, it's 2021. It's more accepted than ever to be gay and trans. Don't If you don't want to hide it, you don't have to, and know your worth. And know that as you know, college educated students, you have a lot to bring to the table. And if somewhere wants to turn you away just because of your identity, find somewhere else, because you will have somewhere else that will want you. And yeah, I think just one final piece of advice that I wanted to give was that if you're wanting to come out at Marist and you're scared to do so, please know that you can seek out support from great organizations like Fox Pride and the Counseling Center. And no matter how lonely or anxious you might feel in doing so, there will always be people who will love you and who will fight with you. And I think that's it for me.
Well said.
Very well said.
And there's a lot of faculty and adjunct faculty who are absolute allies at Marist. When I came out at Marist, I had already been out, but when I came out, it was such a no-brainer, and lots of support at the school, and it's a real big plus of Marist from my perspective.
Thank you. I think that's a really good note to end it on. Thank you, Sam. Thank you to all of our panelists today. Thank you guys for coming.